Hello everyone, I'm James Harvey reporting for Vox Populi, and I'm here with the maverick veteran himself, Simon Bean. And Simon was attending my protest earlier today in Norwich regarding men using female changing rooms. I wanted to kind of get a brief history of your background, because I understand you I don't know what section of the Marines you served in, or
well, Army.
Sorry.
Yeah. So I joined the Army in 1983, which was about a year after the Falklands War. Wasn't really my plan to do that. My plan was to go into the Royal Navy, and I'd spent 3 years, including 2 years at sixth form college, trying to get bright enough, if you like, to go into the Navy. Still never succeeded, because there were such strict qualification parameters at the time. You needed maths and English and physics O levels as a minimum to do marine engineering, which is what I was interested in. But after sort of 3 or 4 years of trying my hardest to get in, I still knew that I'd have to put some hard graft in before they'd even look at me a second time. So I bailed out of there, went to the Army Careers Office next door, and said, literally, gives a job. And the bloke says, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I know nothing about the Army. I know everything there is to know about the Navy right now. Told him the story and recommended, because I could drive at that time, I was 18. He said, why don't you join the RCT, which was the Royal Corps of Transport? And he showed me a poster, and there was a soldier hanging out the window of a Foden truck and a bubble coming out of his mouth saying, I'm off to Brussels, why don't you come along for the ride?
Yeah.
And I thought, that's for me. I'm in. You've sold it to me. 6 weeks later, basic training. And that led then to about a 22.5 year career, where I served in all over the continent of Europe, Norway, did a stint in Belize, North America, Canada, operational tour in Bosnia, the first Gulf War, and then Optelic 3 and 4, which was the last month of 3, all of 4, and the beginning of 5 as the Force Master Driver. Yeah. And I literally left there and went straight on 7 months gardening leave, and that was my career over.
What do you think about the war with the Middle East? Because I know a lot of people say that we went there on false pretenses and it was the fake war on terror.
Yeah.
And it's used, what was it? You know a lot about the rape jihad and the fact that they rape little girls. It says in the Quran you can do that against countries you're at war with. And in their minds, we're at war with them because we invaded Afghanistan, Iraq. Do you support the decision to go to those countries?
The first time we went, because it was the first Gulf War, and that was really the liberation of Kuwait. Yeah. So Saddam Hussein and his Republican Guard and the rest of his forces basically invaded and took over, occupied Kuwait. So we went to liberate Kuwait, and you could understand the reason for us being there. It was cut very short. I think the ground campaign was only 100 hours. Led by an air campaign that had lasted pretty much a couple of months. So you could understand that, because you were actually liberating something. But then, of course, Tony Blair said that we were going to Iraq in 2003, and I immediately had doubts, because even though I wasn't going, and I didn't think I would go, because I was in my final 3 years. Yeah. But I honestly thought, well, I don't think we should be going, because it was all based upon the weapons of mass destruction. We pretty much knew that Saddam Hussein and Iraq never had any weapons of mass destruction, because all this was checked as part of intelligence immediately after the first Gulf War. So where he would have had those stockpiles, nobody knew. We felt that, a few of us felt, that if he had those stockpiles, he would have used them against us at the end of the first Gulf War. But, so it was all a bit sort of quite surreal in a way, and, but we went and we did our job. And I think, like so often happens, we left that theatre of operations and left it in a worse condition to what it was when we went in, because Saddam Hussein was controllable, because he had control over all his people. Whether that's right or wrong is, for another discussion perhaps. But by taking Saddam Hussein out and his infrastructure out, it just destabilised the Middle East completely. Yeah. And that's led, I think, to the position where we're at now, where we're getting, Iraqi refugees coming onto the shores of England.
The invasion.
And
this is it as well. I saw Andrew Bridgen talking about this, that we're at war with Russia, but we don't even know it yet. Our politicians aren't telling us. And so this is my concern, is that I'm going to get conscribed into the military, sent away when I should be fighting for the UK. I'm going to have to leave my girlfriend, and, if I have a daughter at that point, when I probably won't, but people have to leave their daughters and go off to fight in a different country. Meanwhile, we've got an invasion into the UK by migrant men who are completely unvetted and no police checks are really done on them. And they're committing all sorts of atrocities and rapes and stabbings and terror attacks. And I won't be here to defend my country, my future wife. And so that's my concern with that. And I did want to ask, I know Russia was only communist until recently, really. But Putin is still in control. And while I'm against communism, what I'm seeing going on in Russia at the moment, I actually agree with a lot of what Putin has done. So I wanted to ask if you support the war against Russia, and if not, why? If you don't support it, why? How come?
Well, when this invasion of the Ukraine first occurred a few years back, and I can remember it was Liz Truss, and I think was she foreign minister or something like that.
Yeah.
And she was encouraging Brits to go to the Ukrainian embassy and basically join up as fighting soldiers on the side of the Ukraine. And it was something that I found really sort of quite disgusting. And I did a little, very short 5-minute video on it. I put the clip in there of her advertising these military jobs, if you like, on Sky News. I even emailed her and she denied all knowledge. I never said that. So I then sent her the video clip, and of course she couldn't deny it. But, in that video I was saying, the way things are going with destabilisation in the Middle East and destabilisation in Eastern Europe now, it won't be long before we're fighting the war on our own doorsteps. So why would we even consider joining up and going to fight for Ukraine when Ukraine isn't even a full member of NATO? Yeah. And if it was a full member of NATO, NATO would be taking care of it. So, but as it, I suppose we've all know the history of it now. It's literally sort of Ukraine and Russia are having a punch up. Loads and loads of innocent lives are being lost on both sides. You've got us and the US supplying arms and things and cash, and it's under the guise of foreign aid to the Ukraine. Yeah. And I think we're just sort of perhaps intensifying things over there. We're getting involved in things that we needn't get involved in. It's probably because there's stuff that goes on between our countries and the Ukraine that they don't want to be uncovered, which is why we're piling the support into the Ukraine. And it's been long said, and it's been on many of old black and white movies, that Ukraine contains pharmaceutical labs, bio war labs.
The Azov battalion.
Yeah, so why would we want to get involved in it to such a degree? Why would we keep throwing money into it if it wasn't for any other reason than to hide what is actually going on in the Ukraine? And now that Lammy has sent 600 million, I think it is, to the Ukraine just this past week, and the United States have sent over $700 million to the Ukraine just in this past week, and this happened within 24 hours of the winter fuel allowance being taken off our pensioners. The whole thing just beggars belief, and you wonder what on earth is actually going on in our country and what the actual final agenda is.
This is it with the winter fuel allowance. They're choosing whether they're making the pensioners choose. People who've spent their entire lives working whether to heat or eat. And while they're doing that, they are sending billions of pounds to Ukraine because they matter. They need heating and they need food and they need all of this. They're putting £17,000 each into a little rainbow crossing on the roads. Yeah. They are wasting our money, and it makes me think, what are we even paying taxes for? I know this year I'm going to have to pay around £3,000 in taxes, and none of that money doesn't go to help me or to fix the potholes in the roads. It goes to help these migrants, to help these other countries. How about we focus on our own people first? Because to be frank, I'm well. I don't want to swear on this, but I'm well annoyed at the state of our government going. And I'm talking with Safa at the moment. I know you're good friends with Safa about doing some sort of charity fundraising event, like a boxing match or something, in order to raise money for these pensioners. Yeah. But we shouldn't have to do this. No. Our government should be doing this, and they're not. Right.
Because it's always been, if you paid, I think it's 37 years of a stamp, what they used to call a stamp, a tax stamp, then you had all these entitlements upon retirement. And retirement moved, like I can remember for men it was 65, and for women it was 60. And then suddenly everything went to 65, and then the men moved to 67. And you had people that were just about to retire finding out that they had to work an extra year or 2 years. Yeah. So and we know that tax is theft anyway. Everywhere in the world, all forms of tax is theft. And so by making people work that extra year or two, you're squeezing the life out of them. A lot of people do manual labour. So by the time you hit 60, you're pretty much at the end of your manual labour life existence, if you like. I know I'm sort of struggling now. I'm only a couple of months away from 60. And I'm...
You look well for your age, mate.
Oh, thanks, mate. But I'm, finding it a little bit more difficult now, with lifting and carrying and all that sort of stuff. But I'll keep doing it because it's just ingrained into me. That's the military ingrains that into you. You just keep going until you drop, literally. So, but there's a lot of people out there that haven't perhaps got the ability to do that, and to keep moving the age and then saying, oh, you're not getting this and you're not getting that, and then you couple that into the fiscal drag. So even when they have got the luxury of saying, right, I'm retired, you've got the fiscal drag from the tax allowance remaining low at what, 12,000 is it? 12,006 or whatever it is. And so if people have got an old age pension, as it was once known, and they've got a tiny little work pension sitting on top of that, that puts them over that lower rate allowance. Yeah. They pay the tax and they end up with less money than the people that have got no work pension, just an old age pension, and are able then to earn tax credits, pension tax credits on top of that, and and then claim the winter fuel allowance. So the people that do less or earn less end up with more money at the end of a month than the person who's worked all their life and have got one or two workplace pensions on top of the old age pension.
The UK rewards people who give nothing to society over the people who give everything to society.
Yeah.
Law-abiding citizens are always put on the back burner. I mean, Tony Blair showed that when he took away people's guns.
Yeah.
Because that only affects law-abiding citizens. We saw it at Notting Hill Carnival. There was free guns seized, and by the way, that happens all the time. You just don't hear about it.
That's right.
There were tons of guns seized when I was growing up in Penarth. There was literally a gun attack up there. It does happen more than we think.
Yeah.
But we're not told about it because we're under this impression that gun control works when in fact
it doesn't.
It doesn't.
Because it just pushes it underground like everything.
Yeah.
So, you know, the guns are there. Everyone knows those guns are there, and that's how you know, bad people, you know, retrieve those guns and use them for bad things. Yeah. So it's achieved nothing. Surely you're better having some form of proper gun control where if you've got a clean record, you can have a gun and it's correctly licensed, and that gun can be traced through its lifespan of, you know, being sold from one person to another to another to another. Because most farmers have a firearm of some description, be it a 2.2 rifle for rabbits, or they've got a shotgun for birds and things like that. You know, and they're all licensed. They know exactly where they are at every moment of every day. But everything else is just pushed by the wayside.
Guns were never there for people to kill other people or defend themselves. Guns were actually, in the UK Constitution, because we do have one, an uncodified Constitution, it says the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. And the reason we have that right is to balance out the power between the government and the people. Yeah. At the moment, the weapons are all in the hands of the government. So the government at any point could come along and take our land and nationalise everything. And that's what they do in every communist country. I mean, look at Hitler. He took away his citizens' rights to bear arms first. Same with Mao or any Russia. You know, most communist regimes have done that as well. Where they've gone and taken the citizens' guns and then gone and taken their land. Look at Venezuela, I believe, just before they went socialist. So that's the real reason that the guns were there. And I mean, talking about the winter fuel allowance as well, I wanted to add this quickly. Clive Lewis, who is the Labour MP for Norwich South, he attended the counter-protest to us last time, and he's the same MP who said that it's far right to talk about boats and asylum seekers and immigration. He abstained from voting in the winter fuel allowance row in Parliament. And I think that's more cowardly than people who voted.
It is.
It's incredibly cowardly. And this is what I tell everyone. When you vote for someone, you're not voting for the person, you are voting for the party. Right? If you vote for, a Labour MP in one area, right? If that Labour MP wants to do something that's in the best interest of the people in his constituents, he's not going to do that. He's going to do whatever the leader of that political party tells him to do. And then the leader of that political party doesn't make all the decisions. His decisions comes from the UN, NATO, the World Economic Forum, United Nations, etc. So ultimately, I don't want to say it, but voting, I think voting works. I think voting is brilliant, but there's too many moving parts.
Too many moving parts to it.
Yeah,
there is. It's like I live in the Boston Skegness sort of area, so I've got Richard Tice now as my MP for reform, which is great, and I start work early, 6 o'clock in the morning. So on that day of the last general election, I delayed me start so that I was first in the queue for the voting. I went straight in, made my cross for the Reform Party, walked out, and the second bloke was just walking up the path. And as I was driving away from the place, everybody else was sort of coming in. And it was, you know, the amount of people that voted Reform in that area was phenomenal. Which is why Richard Tice, you know, is the MP for that area. But Boston Skegness is fiercely, what's the word? You know, they're very pro-English, and they're very vocal when they see immigrants moving into the area. And there's always no end of protest up in Skegness, you know, and it's always about migrants in holiday camps and things like this, you know, and there's 2 or 3 hotels in Boston that are full of immigrants,
Boston is
etc.
horrendous, yeah.
Yeah, and that's largely why everybody, I think, voted for reform. Because during the local elections last year, there was 3 Conservative MPs or 3 Conservative councillors. They all got taken down and replaced with 3 independent councillors, which you could see that the writing was on the wall then for a Conservative win come the general election. And Richard Tice won it, which is great. It's all right. You don't see him, do you? You never see him unless you go and write to him or go to one of his sort of surgeries, as they call them. But it was great. But at the same time, I returned to work and I'm saying to people, don't forget to go and put your vote in today. Oh, I'm not going to bother. Oh, I'm not going to bother. I'm not going to bother. Because people are so, I think, fed up to the back teeth of all these moving parts, as you call them, within the election process, that they were saying, what's the point? If you vote for Labour, that's one cheek of the arse, and if you vote Conservative, that's the other one, and they've got...
That's not it, though. That's not the only 2 parties.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
And I was saying to people, well, go and vote for reform. Don't vote for Labour and Conservative. Vote reform. But instead, they just abstained.
What I seem to remember is the Royal Air Force, they were forcing people to get... I don't know if you know much about this, where the Royal Air Force during the... I don't know if I can talk... Yeah, I can. During the... They were trying to force people to get... I understand it was the same with the military, because the military, they'd be sent overseas. I don't think you were serving during that time. I'm assuming you've got a few mates who were...
I finished it end of December 2005, I
Yeah.
But word was sort of getting out that soldiers, sailors, airmen were being forced to be vaccinated. And there was a guy called Mick Stott who contacted me and said that he was going to go into Royal Army Medical Services, which is, I can't even remember where it is now, somewhere in sort of the West Midlands. Would I go and assist him in issuing them with a big petition that he put out to sort of say, please don't because you don't know what the consequences of the is going to be because it's not been tested correctly. And his background was all sports, nutrition, physical training in the military. So he knows exactly what he's sort of talking about, because there's a lot of sports science and whatnot involved in that, and the use of pharmaceuticals and how that can affect fitness in general, So we went down there and we had a little speech outside, and then we issued this petition into the Royal Army Medical Services. And I think it just fell on deaf ears. Nothing happened. Soldiers, sailors, airmen were then getting... They rightly turned around and said, well, I don't want to be... And very quickly they said, all right, well, you don't need to have it, or you don't have to have it. It's not compulsory, so that's fine. But of course it had a detrimental effect against their career. So people were being held back on promotion and things like that in that initial couple of years of the rollout. So, and I know a lot of people left the military as a result of that because they said, well, you're basically putting a block on my promotion and my furtherment in my career because you want me to have an untested etc. Of course, at the same time, you've got lots of sort of service people that are very, very young, they're impressionable, it's yes sir, no sir, whatever you say, I better...
Jarheads, yeah.
So they were happily going along with the programme. But, I didn't agree with it. Mick Stott certainly didn't agree with it. But, it was when you're taking on an organisation like the Ministry of Defence, there's very little chance of winning.
What is it? They say a good soldier is one who doesn't ask questions. And do you know much about Prussia?
Prussia, not really, no.
So in a war against Napoleon, in a war against Napoleon, Prussia implemented something called the Prussia education system, the Prussian education system. And this education system was created to basically design the perfect soldier, someone who doesn't critically think, someone who doesn't ask questions. And this was implemented into Prussia at the time. And the US soon followed when the Rockefeller put £1 million into the formation of the General Education Board, and it's since come over to the UK. And this education system is all about telling you what to think, not teaching you how to think, not teaching you how to critically think. And this is what we're seeing in the education system at the moment. So when people ask, well, why are young people going along with this? It's because they haven't been taught to question otherwise. And I've always thought personally that a soldier, while they must be able to follow and obey orders, they should also be able to question those orders and question whether the legality of them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether that's something you...
Well, yeah, obviously it depends on the job you're doing and when those orders are coming in. So if your orders are to do with, if they're battle orders, then they're taken down in very quick order. They're given out very quickly. You scribble them down, or you retain that knowledge in your head as quickly as you can, using whatever sort of form of shorthand you prefer, and you carry out those orders because they're absolutely crucial. But orders that are given in your peacetime location, when you're just on standby, you're training for war, because if you're not at war, you're training for war, they can be questioned a little bit more. But you haven't often got the ability to question anything until you start going up the rungs of the ladder. Yeah, so I had an admin sergeant called Mick Buckley, and I questioned something with him on exercise line art, and he just came out in a pleasant way. He just said, "Oh, don't start growing a brain," and it's something that's stuck with me forever. And as I started to move up through the ranks, I could understand where it was coming from, because you don't want private soldiers, drivers, as I was, that was my rank. You don't want drivers, private soldiers, sort of dictating to senior NCOs what should and shouldn't be done, and you shouldn't really question anything they say because they're they're classed as God in a way, and you sort of learn from them and the people between them, the lance corporals and the corporals. So, and that's the way it should be. But it's accepted that as you become a section commander, as you become a troop commander, as a staff sergeant, and you become a sergeant major, you have more input in the orders process. So you can actually advise officers on how something should be handled, and you can advise the lower rank soldiers on how something should be handled. So suddenly this saying of grow a brain, don't grow a brain, sort of made perfect sense, because if you didn't have the orders process the way it is, it would be a free-for-all and nothing would ever get done, because everybody could be contradicting everybody else,
Very true.
So it works very, very well, and I would say the British Army's probably got the best way of doing it, because although it's quite autocratic, there are moments of democracy that break into it and you can discuss things. Whereas other military formations, it's autocratic all the way, and there's no democracy. You cannot question anything, even if it's going to result in people's lives being lost unnecessarily, So yeah, it's an interesting thing, orders.
And that brings me on to kind of the final question, and I wanted to talk about Manchester Airport. Because when I first saw what was going on, I didn't get the full context of the clip. And because I didn't get full context of the clip, I was actually on the side of the people who were beaten. I believed that they were on the floor, the officer had no right to stamp on his head. And I think a lot of people agreed with that at the time. And then I kind of thought about it and I realised, wait, hold on a minute, they're at an airport, all they're getting over the radio is there's a Muslim, police officer down, broken nose, that kind of thing. And so they rush into the situation and they've got to neutralise the threat because you don't know what you're going to deal with. I mean, terror attacks happen quite frequently.
Yeah.
So I've kind of changed my mind on that massively. And from what I've seen now, the Muslims rioting and them not being charged, yet all of these people who were involved in the protests, the Enough is Enough protests, are now getting years. You know, one of them's got 9 years in prison. And I think anyone who did commit riot or set a bin on fire, or set a hotel on fire, deserves to be in prison.
Yeah.
I heartily believe that, right?
Yeah.
But I'm seeing a major kind of double standard here, where if you're a Muslim, you can do whatever you want. In Hare Hill, Leeds, if you're a Roma Gypsy, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
But if you're a white, you're British,
Yeah.
and you're upset about little girls being murdered, you can't. And, you know, when the stabbings in Southport happened, I remember Sid was, she came across the pictures on Twitter, horrible.
Yeah.
And she was in crying, she was in tears, and she said, James, I don't know how we're going to be able to have children. And that's what a lot of Western women feel like as well. And so people are angry, and I understand people are angry. You know, people have been silenced, censored on social media, imprisoned for their beliefs. They have every right to be angry. But unfortunately, if you do riot in this country and you're white and you're British, you get treated worse than if you're a Muslim and you riot. So I wanted to know what your, you know, looking at your background, I wanted to know what your opinion on the whole Manchester airport incident was.
Yeah, well, I always, when I see something, I was sort of the same as you initially. I just saw the police sort of kicking and punching people that were already down.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, the news reader was sort of saying that, you know, a woman, it turned out to be a policewoman, had been punched in the face and that her nose was broken. So my immediate thought then was, which was a secondary thought really, was where's the context? What's caused all this? Because there's got to be more to this than meets the eye. And I've always, you know, whenever I'm researching something to make a video, or I'm going out to, you know, protest something, or even if I'm just writing a post down that I can send out through Facebook or any other form of social media, I always try and research it as fully as I can to get the whole story, all the context, and where possible, both sides of the story if it's affecting both sides. So, you know, it's crucial because the amount of people that went sort of half-cocked on that, and the police were the worst thing ever in Manchester because what they were doing to the people on the ground. You know, those numbers were quite large. But once you got that then turned around and you put the bit of video that was, in inverted commas, originally missing or unavailable or not released to the media, once that came out, then the perspective was there and people could understand. But we've got to get rid of all this two-tier thing. You know, it's not just two-tier policing. It's not just two-tier, if you're Muslim you can do it and nothing's said, but if you're white and you do it, you're banged up. Everything's got to be across a level playing field, because the two-tier situation is coming across everything throughout our lives on a regular basis.
Thank you, Simon. I really appreciate you coming in today. And thank you for coming to our demonstration as well.
Absolute pleasure.
And it's an interesting perspective to hear is your views on the Manchester airport incident, because, I mean, the context was the last thing that came out, and it should have been the first thing to come out.
Yeah.
Because when there's no context, everyone's going to jump to conclusions. It's going to cause fighting, it's going to cause rioting, and so they need to provide context more. And I also find it weird that with stabbings such as the one recently in Blackpool and Hayes, they always put out the name of the perpetrators. But then when it comes to any of the terror attacks or the terror incidents, they wait for ages to put out his name.
That's right.
If you saw the stabbing in Mannheim, Germany, with Michael Stuzenberger being stabbed, the media ran with far-right activists stabbed in Mannheim, Germany.
Yeah.
Nowhere do they mention, they mention later down the article, but people only read the headlines, don't they?
Yeah.
They mention later down the article, there was an Afghan national who committed the stabbing attack.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to find his bloody name. So it's seeing us always be put on a back burner. And I do want to, I think all of our viewers would agree as well, I want to thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And, anything we can do to help you, if you're organising a demonstration, just give me a ring.
Smashing.
Thank you.
Lovely.
Thanks
Thanks very much, James.
Tell people where they can find you quickly.
Great day. Well, you can find me on Telegram. If you just type in @MaverickVeteran, all one word, joined together, and that will lead you probably into me Telegram, into one of me Facebook accounts, and into YouTube, which is shadow banned, and I haven't been on for about a year now. But I'm going to start getting it up and running again. So @MaverickVeteran, and you'll find me pretty much everywhere, including X.
Thank you, Simon. And again, if anyone's new to the channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button. And I'll speak to you all soon. It's been James Harvey from Vox Populi. Thank you very much.